Hello everyone, welcome to Frightful Whispers. I'm here to guide you into the shadows tonight. I know you're using this video to unwind and drift off to sleep. So, before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Where are you watching from? And what time is it for you? Now, get cozy, relax, and let the whispers of the night take over. Story 1. The Vanishing in Black Hollow. When I was 9, I came home from school to find my mom and my grandfather seated at the kitchen table, their faces drawn and still. I could tell, even before they spoke, that something was deeply wrong. They told me my dad had disappeared. He and my Uncle Ren had gone on a weekend hunting trip out in the hills east of Black Hollow. They'd only made it about half a mile into the timberline when Dad realized he'd left his call horn in the truck. It's a gadget that mimics the grunt of a buck. Nothing fancy, just essential gear for deer season. He told Uncle Ren to wait there and went back for it. He never came back. Ren said he waited 30 minutes before worry set in. He headed back to the truck expecting to find my dad there. But the truck was empty. By nightfall, he'd called in the entire Edgewater County Sheriff's force. They searched the hills, combed every trail, every ravine, for 2 full weeks. Nothing, no boot prints, no dropped gear, not even a broken twig. Eventually, the sheriff called off the search. Mom kept Dad listed on the missing persons registry. For years. The whole family pitched in to hire a retired detective from Coldstream named Ray Heller, a decorated ex-cop with a reputation for persistence. But even Ray came up short. He only gave Mom and Grandpa one new theory, that maybe Dad had wandered off into an old mining region near a derelict settlement called Mirror's End. Ray figured my dad might have fallen into one of the deep shafts that honeycombed the area. Some of them go down forever. It sounded plausible, until you remember that during the search, every shaft that could be entered safely was scouted by cave teams and scent dogs. They didn't find him. That didn't rule out the possibility, but it never sat quite right. What really chilled Mom, though, was something Ray found but the sheriff never told us about. Graffiti. Deep in one of the mines, spray-painted symbols covered part of the wall. Weird, unintelligible glyphs. Ray didn't recognize the language, but it looked deliberate, not the usual nonsense teenagers tag in secret hangouts, and that made him wonder if whoever marked the walls also knew what happened to my father. Ren tried to stay involved, but the guilt ate him alive. Everyone told him it wasn't his fault, that he'd done everything right, but he never forgave himself. After Dad vanished, he drifted away, sending cards on birthdays, calling Mom near the anniversary. But for the most part, he stayed gone. I didn't learn the full story until I was much older. In the years between Dad's disappearance and the day he was legally declared dead, we cycled through grief and fragile hope. My sister and I would ask, over and over, when is Dad coming home? The questions alone nearly broke Mom. Over time, the pain faded to a dull scar. Life went on. By the time I turned 22, my sister was in college up in North Briar and I was working full-time at a mechanics shop in Ashfield. I hadn't seen Ren in at least 5 years, so when Mom told me he'd called, specifically asking to see me, I felt more than curiosity. I felt relief. I drove out to his place one Saturday. He was living in a little cabin near Old Filson. The moment he opened the door, I knew I'd been wrong to assume the worst. He wasn't a wreck. He wasn't a shut-in drowning in liquor and regret. He was sharp-eyed, soft-spoken, and genuinely glad to see me. We spent the afternoon catching up, swapping stories, eating sliced turkey and old cheddar with beer. The topic of my dad hovered like a specter at the edge of our words until, finally, it stepped into the light. Ren said he'd been back to the place where Dad vanished. Many times. No trace ever turned up, but walking the land made him feel a little less powerless. He asked if I'd go with him next time. At first, I said no. What good would it do, stirring up ghosts? I wanted to build a bond with Ren, not pick at old wounds. But over the months that followed, I changed my mind. Eventually, I told him yes. We made plans to hike the hills east of Black Hollow together. We treated it like any regular outing. Packed sandwiches, brought a couple of beers. The idea was simple. If I felt overwhelmed, we'd turn back. But something strange happened as we neared the place. The forest wasn't haunted, not really. But for years, I'd imagined it that way. As if my father's spirit still wandered beneath the canopy. To finally set foot there and see it for what it was, just trees, leaves, wind. It helped. Somewhat. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that a part of my dad was out there. We reached Big Stream Creek and rested on a flat rock near the water. I assumed that was the end of the hike, but Ren said there was something he wanted to show me. He led me to a ridge overlooking the mines, the ones Ray had once investigated. That's when he told me what he'd kept hidden all those years. He had seen my dad. On that day, after Dad disappeared, Ren had scoured the woods shouting his name. He wasn't much of a tracker, but by dumb luck, he reached a high outcropping. From there, he saw someone dressed like my father, walking into one of the mine shafts. He ran down the slope, flashlight in hand, and followed him inside, but the shaft was empty. I asked if he saw the graffiti. He hadn't. But he said something about that mine made his skin crawl. That moment haunted him more than anything else. He kept wondering, had Dad hidden? Was he injured, unable to call out? Or had something worse happened? And now, Ren wanted to go back down into the shaft. He did it now and then, he said, to feel closer, to exercise the place. I agreed. We'd come that far. What was the point in turning around? We took the safer trail down. Signs warned of danger, unstable tunnels, poisonous air. I asked Ren if he thought Dad had fallen or been caught in a cave-in. He said if that were the case, they'd have found his body by now. As we got close to the entrance, a jagged wound in the earth, everything changed. The air thickened. The world grew quiet. I remember the smell. Damp wood, rust, rot. We crossed into the dark. I'll continue the rewritten version in the next message, continuing from the moment they enter the mine. Would you like me to proceed with that now? Story 2. The Hollow That Forgot Time. My name's Dr. Neela Sharma, and I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Laurel Ridge University's Department of Cultural Anthropology. My focus lies at the intersection of ritual practice, memory, and social cohesion. Basically, I study how people hold on to who they are through tradition, and how their past echoes into the present. I've led several enriching research projects throughout my academic journey. Most have left me inspired, but there's one I'd give anything to forget, and that's not because of the people I met or the subject itself. Quite the opposite. The community was extraordinary, but something happened during that fieldwork, something I've never managed to explain away. It happened while I was researching the kinship networks and folklore of the mountain folk of southwestern Bellamy Ridge, a scattered population with deep, often undocumented roots. Oral traditions suggest their ancestry includes a unique blend of black settlers, displaced native groups, and isolated European migrants who intermarried through centuries of cultural marginalization and social exile. The term ridgefolk was once used as a slur but has since been reclaimed by descendants who embrace their multi-ethnic heritage. There's no academic consensus on their exact origin. Some say shipwrecked Spaniards mingled with freed slaves and Cherokee survivors. Others trace the lineage to pre-revolutionary escapees and people fleeing colonial caste laws. One thing was clear: their identity didn't fit into clean demographic checkboxes, and that made them fascinating. It was a dream assignment. I didn't need to fly halfway around the world or memorize a new alphabet. I just needed to follow the stories into the hills. That trail led me to a place called Ashford Hollow, a village so remote that most maps don't even show it. What intrigued me most were strange reports, vague allusions in interviews and regional folklore suggesting the villagers of Ashford Hollow aged differently. Not in the poetic sense, literally. Slower, like time slid off them. I'd filled notebook after notebook chasing false leads. But this rumor stuck with me. It felt absurd. But what if it wasn't? The road into Ashford Hollow was more a suggestion than a highway. A winding ribbon of gravel that tested the suspension of my battered hatchback with every bend. The day I arrived, I remember thinking the car might die just as I crossed the invisible threshold into somewhere older than roads. Ashford Hollow sat in a bowl of mist and pine. Sagging wood houses clung to the slope like barnacles on a forgotten hull. Wood smoke curled into the sky and the air smelled of sap and soil. I parked near a boarded-up general store and slung my bag over one shoulder. A man in denim overalls gave me a long, slow nod from across the street. I returned it. Inside the store, the clerk was narrow-eyed, gray-stubbled, and said almost nothing. I introduced myself as a family history researcher and mentioned I was tracing Appalachian bloodlines. He stared at me for a while, then jerked his chin toward a trail that disappeared behind the store and into the tree line. "Go up there if you got to," he muttered, "but they don't warm easy to strangers. Best you tread light." I thanked him, bought a warm soda and a roll of breath mints, then headed toward the ridge path. The hike was steep and tangled with brush. I pushed through webs and ducked beneath limbs. Eventually, the trail spilled out onto a smaller settlement, half a dozen cabins tucked deep into the pines. A woman on a porch was shelling peas into a bowl. She didn't smile. When I introduced myself and said I was tracing ancestral lines, she didn't answer right away. Just looked at me, then said flatly, "You want to speak with Mama. She's inside." Before I could respond, the cabin door opened behind her. Two men stepped out, tall, broad, and sun-worn. Brothers, maybe. They didn't offer greetings, they didn't ask questions. They just stared. "I'm a researcher," I said, heart thumping in my chest. "I heard there was a family here with deep roots in the area. I'm not here to bother anyone." One of them, the shorter of the two, finally said, "Mama's 116. Don't push her too hard." They moved aside and motioned me in. The interior was dim and smelled of wood smoke and old quilts. In the corner of the room lay a figure, so thin and still that for a moment I thought she was part of the bedding. She was not simply old. She was withered past the edge of life. Her skin clung to bone, her hair lay in sparse white threads, and her eyes were sunk deep beneath the ridges of her skull. Her hands looked brittle enough to snap. Her sons, if that's what they were, dragged a stool over for me, I sat down, notebook in lap, trying not to stare. I started gently. "Ma'am, I'm Neela Sharma. I study family traditions. I'd love to know where your people came from." She didn't move. I tried a few more questions about her parents, her childhood, her memories, but she gave no reaction. Her eyes were open, fixed on something distant and invisible. "She's tired," one of the men said softly. "Don't wear her out." I nodded, unsure if I should continue, but my curiosity gnawed at me. Her face haunted me. I leaned in slightly, speaking softly. "Ma'am, how have you lived so long? What's your secret?" For a second, nothing changed. Then her eyes twitched and her mouth slowly opened. Her voice was a croak, barely louder than the wind outside. "It feeds on the years." She collapsed back against the pillow, body trembling from the effort. Her eyes rolled back. Her chest heaved. The two men rushed to her side. One turned to me, shouting, "Get out!" I grabbed my bag and stumbled down the steps as the door slammed shut behind me. The woman on the porch was gone, her bowl of peas abandoned. I descended the path in a daze, heart pounding with the echo of her words looping in my head. "It feeds on the years." I didn't go back to campus. I went home, locked the door, wrote everything down while it was still fresh. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing her face. I kept hearing her voice. The next morning, I called an old friend, Dr. Felix Monroe, a folklorist who specialized in Appalachian mysticism. I told him everything. There was a pause. Then Felix said, "I've heard whispers of a place like that. Never got any solid proof. Just folk tales about villages where time gets traded." "Traded?" I asked. "Not literally," he said. "Just stories about people making agreements with something older than God." He laughed nervously. "Still, if you publish anything, send me a draft." But I never published anything. I didn't even include the village in my paper. I went back a week later. I had to. The trail was still there, the general store boarded tighter than before. I hiked the ridge, heart in my throat. But the houses? Empty. Not abandoned, cleared out. No furniture, no dishes, no people. Even the pea bowl was gone. I searched the house where Anya, if that was her name, had lain in bed. Nothing. The windows were broken. The lamp was gone. I called out. No one answered. I never found them again. Later, while combing through obscure archives in the university library, I stumbled across a scan of an 18th century trapper's journal. He spoke of a place called the Quiet Hollow. Said the folks there looked 20 when they should have been 70. He said he'd never return. No coordinates, no names. But the description matched Ashford Hollow perfectly. And as for Anya? Still see her in dreams sometimes. In them, I'm sitting on that stool again, asking my question, and she always answers the same way. It feeds on the years. Story 3. The Sable Witch of Grimsvale. In the mist-shrouded folds of 19th century Western Carolina, nestled between the shadowed gulches and wind-battered pines of Grimsvale Hollow, something evil took root. It wasn't a ghost story murmured around hearths or a superstition born of backwoods isolation. No, this was something else, something with teeth. It started with a name, and that name was Mary Beth Ward, though she would be known, in whispered breath and terrified scripture, as the Sable Witch of Grimsvale. This is not the kind of tale where truth fades into myth. This is a record of torment carved into the lives of a single family and branded into the land like a burn that never healed. The Holloway family, Mason, his wife Clara, and their 6 children, settled in Grimsvale in the summer of 1809. They bought acreage thick with timber and thin with neighbors, aiming to build a peaceful life away from the chaos of Raleigh. For nearly a decade, they thrived. But in the fall of 1819, their peace began to rot. It began with knocks on their cabin walls, sharp, deliberate raps that sounded exactly like a fist pounding from the inside. They blamed branches or raccoons at first, but then came the scratching. Not random, rhythmic, like long nails tracing runes across the glass. Soon after, the children began waking up screaming about a woman with a face like a dried apple and hair like burnt wire watching them from the corner of their room. The Holloways dismissed it. Fever dreams, they thought, until the furniture began to move. It would shift in the night. Chairs dragged across floorboards. A cradle flipped onto its side. Their youngest son, Jonah, swore he saw a black shape crawling across the ceiling like a spider with a woman's head. Then, one night, Mason Holloway saw it himself. He was walking through his cornfield under a bone-white moon when he caught sight of a figure crouched at the edge of the stalks. A beast with the snout of a dog, the tail of a cat, and human eyes that stared like open wounds. He raised his rifle and fired. The thing vanished like smoke, and that night the knocking returned, harder, closer, angrier. Soon the family heard whispers behind the walls, low and guttural, impossible to understand. Sometimes the whispers formed words. "I remember you," they said, "and always, she is awake." The worst of it fell upon their daughter, Elsie. She was barely 13 when the torment focused on her. Bruises bloomed across her arms and legs as though she'd been thrashed with a switch. Her hair was torn out in chunks. She was found pinned to her bed by invisible weight, unable to scream, with her eyes fixed on something just above her. "She sings to me," she said once, trembling. "She sings from the floorboards." No doctor could explain her fits. No preacher could drive the presence out. Then the voice came clear as day, like an old woman spitting through a throat full of ash. "I am Mary Beth." He broke his word. Now the blood runs backward. Mason remembered then. A land dispute years earlier with a woman named Mary Beth Ward. She'd lived on the edge of the hollow. Rumors said she practiced old things, made poultices no doctor could understand, and spoke to animals. She'd died in a fire, or so they believed. But now, her voice echoed through the house, mockingly telling their secrets, predicting deaths, laughing at their terror. The children began to dream of her, standing in corners, crawling out of fireplaces, whispering from beneath the floor. Visitors who stayed even a night left white-faced and shaken. One neighbor vomited blood after being mocked by the voice. One thing became clear. Mary Beth didn't want the house. She wanted Mason Holloway. His body began to fail. His limbs trembled uncontrollably. His speech slurred. He forgot names, his own sometimes. The doctors said it was nerve fever. The local healer said nothing. The witch only said, "You will choke on your name before I'm done." In the winter of 1822, Mason was found in his bed, dead. A flask of dark, tar-smelling liquid was found beside him. The family swore they'd never seen it before. The official cause of death was listed as unknown. Unofficially, it was blamed on the Sable Witch. Her fury didn't stop. Elsie was tormented into near madness. Friends avoided the family. One visiting. Judge left in the night after claiming to see a woman made of smoke with burning coals for eyes standing over his cot. Even Elias Frey, a Civil War general and future governor, came to investigate after hearing the stories. His men camped near the Holloway farm and brought torches, rifles, and Holy Scripture. They left before sunrise. Frey never spoke of what he saw again, but he was quoted once saying, "I would march naked through enemy fire before setting foot in Grimsvale again." Then, one day, the witch declared she was leaving. Her voice rasped through the house like wind through dead trees. 7 years, and I return. And then, silence. For 7 years, no disturbances, no whispers, no bruises. The family tried to forget. But in the spring of 1829, she came back. The beds trembled, lamps shattered, and one night a scream came from Elsie's room. When her mother arrived, all she found was the impression of hands in the dust, pressing down on the mattress, then silence again. The family eventually moved, but the land, it stayed sick. Locals say the earth never healed. Birds won't nest there. The ground grows nothing but poison ivy and twisted vines. Today, Grimsvale is mostly abandoned, but the Holloway cellar still stands, its doorway boarded up and its stone foundation blackened by old fire. Some call it cursed. Others call it a place where the veil is thin. Paranormal groups have tried staying the night. Some lasted an hour, others minutes. A reporter once said the cellar sounded like it was breathing. Inside, the air hangs heavy. Moisture drips from the ceiling like sweat. Sometimes you hear laughter that isn't yours. What was Mary Beth Ward, truly? A spirit? A demon? Something older than either? Skeptics blame carbon poisoning, hysteria, or the power of suggestion. But those explanations fall apart when you meet the people who lived it. They don't speak of the Sable Witch lightly. They say she's not dead. She's just waiting. And if the woods ever fall silent, truly silent, you'd best keep walking, because silence is her breath, and breath means she's near. Are you brave enough to follow the trail? These stories are more than folklore. They're warnings, whispers from the past echoing into the present. If they stirred something in you, curiosity, unease, or the sense that some truths hide just beneath the surface, then don't stop here. Share these tales with someone who dares to read them after dark. Join the conversation. What do you believe happened in the mines, the Hollow, or Grimsvale? Follow for more true inspired legends, forgotten histories, and eerie accounts rewritten with fresh eyes. Because some stories don't end. They just wait to be told again.